Now, what we are talking about is objectivity of the press during an electoral campaign. My personal approach to this is, there is this French philosopher called who says that the nearest you can reach to objectivity in the social sciences generally, and probably in the case that you are talking about, is if you declare your interest, or at the outset you say where you stand in this election. In Britain, for example, we've seen Mr. Murdoch's papers changing allegiance from one election to the other, but declaring at the very outset where they stand.
Now, the thing is, in Mauritius, the media haven't been really consistent themselves. At times they would endorse a particular party, a particular leader, depending on their vested interest, and it's not necessarily the journalists or the editorial team for that matter, it's very often the owners. Right? You have very strong owners at times. We've had very strong owners, and we could term them local media barons. So that's the main thing, is that, okay, some of them, and I don't totally agree that they are totally independent newspapers like Michael has been saying. Some of those newspapers you mentioned, part of people in those news desks, they are totally for or against a particular party or a particular person in a party, leader.
It is the way that our maison de rédaction, the editorial team, instruct the journalists. I know from personal experience, I know one case where one of my colleagues went on a private radio and criticized very strongly a company engaged in gambling. And he was declared persona non grata for some time. You know why? Because that company engaged in gambling used to pay 2 million rupees a year for advertising. So, where is the fairness? Money plays a big role, even to get the media rather subjective instead of objective.
What I mean by threats is for the IBA, for example, just to shut the radio down for a certain period of time. So it's very good to talk about freedom of the press. It's very good to talk about the free flow of information. However, how are we in Mauritius going to deal with these threats, which has happened in the past, and I believe it's going to happen again during the next general election?
We should not neglect the fact that private radios have taken enormous space in the media landscape in Mauritius, and trying to fiddle with radios, I think, will result in an enormous backlash. Figures that I had from maybe 2 or 3 years back: 70% of Mauritians who watch the news or seek information do it through the MBC. During the last election time, the MBC ran a systematic campaign against one of the opponents of the then Prime Minister, one also, trying to portray him as someone who's gone completely nuts and speaking day after day the same sentences and words at every political rally that we go to. The end result is what? The end result is trying to get people to think that someone who is planning or who is wanting to govern the country doesn't have any kind of articulate political discourse. The MBC can be used for that too. I am pretty sure that the MBC will be used to portray one of the major political leaders that is aspiring to become the Prime Minister of this country as someone who's weak, who's old, and who will not be able to govern the country. This is what IBA never looks upon.
I think it goes even further than that. It's not only the IBA, it's the external observers who were fooled, because there were international organizations who came to observe these elections, and they found that the NBC was very fair in its treatment because they didn't understand Creole, so they were just doing number crunching. Okay, he got airtime, and actually that's what the NBC does, and they've always been doing that. It's not new, and it's not particular to this particular alliance or this party.
The press is not limited anymore to those who have the microphone, those who have the print shops, because you can go and see things outside them. Thank God. So one thing we're doing is saying we need an alternative. And we're saying, okay, these people are trying to get an alternative, as something was saying, well, good luck to them, because the elector must have the choice. The second thing, that again raised that, but not enough. The question of limits. Limits to expenditure, limits to mandate. To mandate, again, take the States as an example. To mandate of 4 years, you're out. Here, we don't know people who've been already PM or whatever for 3 times 5 years.
How can the media in Mauritius still fulfill its role as a public educator, as a campaign platform, and as a platform for discussion? If one media outlet portrays only one candidate and only one party to the detriment of the others, what is the role of the rest of the media outlets?
Any media outlet should have its own path, and we seem to forget the politicians have their voters, we have our readers, we have our listeners, and we have the people who watch us. They are the ones who decide whether we go on or not. They change stations, they change newspapers, and people are not that stupid. End of the day, they do reckon the fact that some are not being completely independent or some are skewed. They are very good judges of that.
When you stand on the candidate, the thing is that as a woman, you're often being questioned, your credibility. I'm pretty young and I'm often asked, what do you know about politics? Where do you come from? Do you have a social background? Do you have a political background? But however, these kind of questions are rarely ever being asked for men.
We didn't have time to discuss about the role of the so-called social cultural organizations. When election time, these people have a big say in our local politics and do have a lot of influence on the way people vote. We all know how Mauritius is, with the communities, the class and everything. And I think the media has to be very, very cautious when it comes to election time, especially with these people from the so-called social culture.
The real challenge for my radio station in the next elections, I think it will be to give massive airtime to all the groups. Look at Lalit, look at Résistance et Alternative, look at Mouvement Premier Mai. They've been very, very consistent along the years. So I don't know what's wrong in giving them equal airtime.
We should admit to the fact that we are dependent on audiences. The audience like the mainstream actors. Same goes for your programs or for my website. If I would give the possibility for Ashok Supmo, for whom I have the most respect, for Jack Bislal, for whom I have the most respect, and having 40 minutes of videos on them or two hours of airtime on them per week, I'm not even saying per day, you will be driven off and you'll be going to competitors who are having the big old fight within the big boys. Mauritians like their politics in a certain way, and they like it rough and tough. They don't like ideas, they like fights.
The more bashing there is for a radio or a newspaper, that's the best that radio or that newspaper should be expecting, because it gives lots of credibility to that, the paper or the radio. Why? Because if both people from both parties or both alliances, that is the opposition as well as the government, criticize, and this has happened many times, many papers and radios. That's the best that you can expect.